Good afternoon, and welcome to Buffalo State College. Before we get started, I would like to thank Buffalo State College President Howard Cohen for hosting us today, and to acknowledge some of our very special guests and some of my colleagues in the legislature. First, we'll start with the great mayor of the great city of Buffalo, Byron Brown. The comptroller of the great city of Buffalo, Mark Schroeder. The district attorney of the great county of Erie, Frank Sedita. The mayor of the great city of Niagara Falls, Mayor Paul Deisker. My colleague, Assemblymember Sean Ryan. My colleague, Assemblymember Joseph Gillio. My colleague, Assemblymember John Soretto. My colleague, Assemblymember Raymond Walter. My colleague, Assemblymember Michael Kearns. We had the honor of partnering with the governor, the great governor of the great state of New York, Governor Cuomo, on numerous law enforcement initiatives that were important to Western New York as well as to the rest of the state, such as banning assaults, texting while driving, just to name a couple. And every time Governor Cuomo has gotten involved, he has brought his whole heart to the table and worked on these issues along with the legislature to get new laws on enforcement and prevention measures in place. Over the past few years, our region has seen a dramatic increase in heroin usage and overdoses. This drug is eating away at our community. It's destroying families and killing our loved ones, especially our young people. That is why this legislation is so important that the governor will be signing today. It is very significant. It will have a huge impact on not just our community, but the entire state of New York. Yes, we do need to add new penalties and new crimes, but more importantly, this legislation speaks to supporting and increasing access to addiction treatment. We believe that the way to prevent most of this is to get people the treatment that they need and also to provide extreme public education campaigns that will inform New Yorkers, especially our young people and students, to make sure that they do not ever try using these dangerous drugs. This epidemic must be stopped. And this bill that will not only protect our communities, but prevent future generations from using heroin. For that, we have to thank not just the governor, but certainly him, but we have to thank Senator Galvin and the New York State Police for being here today for this bill signing and for dedicating state resources to combating this epidemic. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague in the New York State Senate, Senator Patrick Galvin.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and good afternoon, everybody. I am very pleased to be here and would like to acknowledge Buffalo State President Howard Cohen, and thank you for hosting us today. And also acknowledge my colleague in the Senate, Senator Timothy Kennedy, who is with us. Now, Governor, I know you have a hard time seeing me over here. Got me? I would like to also welcome you back to Western New York, and thank you for taking the time to travel out here today. As a former state trooper and the former sheriff of Erie County, I've seen firsthand how drug use can destroy families and communities. We have all seen this crisis reach epidemic proportions in Western New York and across the state. There clearly was a need to do something. The legislation the governor is signing today is a perfect example of what can be accomplished when both houses of the legislature come together, work with the governor, and deliver results for the people of New York that in this case will undoubtedly save lives. I was honored to serve on a Senate task force that conducted hearings across the state to learn more about heroin and opioid crisis that we face, and proud to co-sponsor this legislation. I thank the governor for his leadership in bringing both houses of the legislature together to take swift action to do something about this threat to our families. We put aside politics to protect our communities and our children from these dangerous drugs. This legislative package provides improved measures to support addiction treatment, new penalties to help crack down on illegal drug distribution, improved accessibility to anti-overdose kits to help save lives, and expands public awareness and education in an effort to prevent drug abuse as a means to combat the problem before it starts. I again thank the governor, Assemblywoman Peoples-Stokes, and all my colleagues in the legislature for taking action that will save lives and make New York a safer place for our children, our families, and our communities. It is now my pleasure to introduce my former colleague, Lieutenant Colonel George Beach of the New York State Police. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Lieutenant Colonel George Beach, Assistant Deputy Superintendent Field Command for the New York State Police, and I would like to thank all of you for being here. In recent years, the New York State Police and our law enforcement partners across the state have seen heroin use, heroin sales, and related heroin and opioid drug overdoses rise to levels that we haven't seen before. This legislation that Governor Cuomo will sign today will only help law enforcement to crack down even harder on the distribution of illegal drugs. Heroin has made a resurgence in our communities and is more potent, addictive, and deadly than the drug we had experienced in the 70s and the 80s. We are seeing more and more of our young people who, because they are no longer able to easily obtain pills like oxycodone, turning to heroin, which is cheaper and more readily available. And because it is such a powerfully addictive drug, many of these new users are getting hooked very quickly. And while the increase in use by young people is most prevalent and concerning, we are also seeing increased addiction to heroin and pills by people of all ages. These new laws that have been created create a new crime, increase penalties, and the governor has also recently authorized the addition of 100 new investigators for the state police, all of which give law enforcement additional tools to continue New York State's fight against illegal drugs. Every day, law enforcement actively develops narcotics intelligence, investigating cases and taking down major drug operations all across the state. We are continually training our troopers in detection and interdiction techniques and for undercover work to stay ahead of trends in narcotic uses and sales. And recently, we began deploying and equipping our community narcotics enforcement units with specially trained canines devoted to detecting heroin and other drugs being shipped, mailed, trucked, and transported through our communities. But for all of us, there is still much more to do. And today, the governor is providing us with the tools we need to better address this problem. On behalf of all law enforcement, I thank Governor Cuomo for these resources, for his leadership, his support, and his commitment to our mission of protecting New Yorkers and keeping our communities safe. It is now my privilege to introduce our next speaker, who is an individual who will be sharing her story on how heroin addiction has affected her family. Please welcome Deanne Kuchowski.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us here today, and I would like to take a few minutes to tell you my story on how heroin affected my life. My name is Deanna, and I am the mother of 3 beautiful children. I raised them in a suburb community, and as a stay-at-home mom, quickly got involved in their school and their activities. They were happy, healthy children for many years there. My son, Matt, was my most mischievous and most loving. He was always curious and would constantly ask questions, always wanting to learn. He was just a typical young boy, and then something changed. At the age of about 14, I noticed he was starting to hang around with a different group of friends. He started to become very defiant, and I would catch him in lies. When I would confront him, he would lie more. He started becoming very difficult in school, His grades were suffering, and I was working with the school to try to get him help. Before I knew it, things started to spiral out of control. He would go out, and I would not know where he was. He was always in trouble, and he was always angry. I tried to talk with him, and he would just say he was misunderstood. It did not take long before he really got into trouble in school, and they expelled him. He started an alternative school, and one day there he found drugs. It was heroin, and I couldn't believe it. I have heard of heroin, but never thought the drug was still around. No charges were filed, and Matt was sent to the PINS program. I started to do my own research on the internet and found out that the opiate drugs is not one that's easily recovered from. The physical addiction, coupled with the mental state of the user, is a deadly match. This drug introduced its ugly head, and now I was going to do whatever I could to help my son. After Matt was issued a PINS officer, I would call with the problems I was still having. He was stealing money from me. He would sell anything he could get his hands on, his video games, DVDs, his television, clothes. I had to let my entire family know what was going on. He would ask for money from them for things he never needed to get, but it was just for drugs. My family had to know this so that the cycle would stop. He would get very angry, but I am thankful my family cooperated and knew what was going on for his sake. He would tell me he was going to a friend's house, and when he came back, he would be high. One night, he had his sunglasses on. I asked him to remove them, and when I looked at his eyes, they were constricted, and his pupils looked like a pencil dot. On another night, I had to call the police to my home to force him into the hospital because I feared for him to go to sleep that night. He was so high that the police basically told me to take him to ECMC for observation. At this point, I felt so helpless. What can I do to get him help? At ECMC, they told me to just walk him around the halls until his symptoms subsided. They could not offer him a detox bed because he was under the age of 18. Because of Matt getting into trouble in school, he had to appear in front of the town judge. After the judge looked over Matt's case, he was told he needed to go to an outpatient substance abuse counseling. After about 2 years of this, I finally thought there was hope for him. I took him to counseling, and they drug tested him there. The one time when I suspected he was still using, I had him to go get tested. He had stated that he could not use the bathroom, and when he was forced to go, he said he accidentally flushed the toilet. This is like admitting you are using. But he swore up and down he wasn't. The judge saw through the nonsense, and at the next court appearance told Matt he had a choice of 5 days in jail or to go to treatment at the Renaissance House. Matt chose to go to Renaissance, and I was elated. I thought that finally he could get the help he needed. Matt started there in May of 2009. He was 16. I did not know what to expect from a treatment facility. This was all new to me. I found that not only did they treat the addict, they also treated the family. There were mandatory meetings for the families, and that was when I realized I was not alone. Many families were suffering from their child's addiction. We would share our stories, and it would rip my heart out. How could this drug become so accessible to our children? Why was it happening? I learned of the progression from painkillers to heroin. Matt was opening up about his use and the things he had done. In about a month, I could see signs of the real Matt coming back. He was laughing, he was lovable, he was gaining weight back, starting to look healthy again. My family and I would go about twice a week to see Matt. Our time with him was really enjoyable. And at the end of 2 months, things just kept improving. Our relationship was mending, and I found the support I needed through our families and the staff on campus. I really thought things were going to be okay. In August of 2009, I realized I received a call from the campus. They had told me that Matt had just walked out the front doors. I had asked them, why can't we just have the police bring him back? They could do that, but Matt has the ability to leave on his own at any time. I did not understand how a 16-year-old who was in treatment has the right to make that decision. Matt needed to want to be there. If he didn't, he would have to face legal consequences. There was nothing they could do, but they did try very hard. Matt did go back to the campus, and the counselors and staff talked with him. They called us in for a family meeting, and we tried to convince him to stay. However, he did not listen. Matt left the campus. I told him that if he did not complete the program, he could no longer live with us. He chose to live with his father. Unfortunately, I did not hear from Matt much after that. It took a while for him to contact me. When he came over for the first time in early October, I took one look at him and knew he was using again. All the same signs were there. I tried to talk with him about it, and he just denied it. My other two children informed his father's family that Matt was using again. Unfortunately, they did not pay attention to the warning. Matt passed away alone in his father's basement on December 2nd, 2009, of a heroin overdose. He was just 17. I will never forget that day, and neither will our family and friends. We lost a son, a grandson, a brother, a nephew, and a friend. We will never get to see Matt get married, have a family of his own, grow old. This was taken from us, along with him, because of the unfortunate circumstances of his addiction. Heroin robbed us of these opportunities. Matt was not a bad kid. The addiction was bad. This bill shows an unprecedented amount of dedication to the war on drugs, especially combating the heroin epidemic, and I want to thank the governor, the state police, Senator Maziarz, and Assemblywoman Peoples-Stokes for their commitment to New York's families who are in similar situations. I am now pleased to introduce the governor of the great New York State, Andrew Cuomo.
I know that was so hard. Yeah. Good afternoon. First to Diana Kochowski, how hard it was for you to come up and tell that story, but how proud and grateful we are that you did. Let's give Diana a round of applause. No, Deanna, you deserve it. To take all that negative energy and use it for a positive purpose really speaks volumes of you. So we're all very sorry for what you went through, but your sharing of it and your example maybe can save others. It's a pleasure to be back in Buffalo and Western New York once again. I always love coming. Pleasure to be with your great mayor, Byron Brown. Pleasure to be with you. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to thank President Howard Cohen for his hospitality once again and for letting us be here. Lieutenant Colonel Beach from the State Police, thank you, and thank the men and women of the State Police for your good work. To my colleagues from the legislature, Senator Gallivan and Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes, thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Give them a round of applause. To all my colleagues from the legislature, they are all now back home. The legislature ended last week. The session is over. I would like to say that I'm really sorry to see them go from Albany, but that would be a little bit of a lie, so I'm not going to say that. No, I like when they come to visit. I do. I like it better when they leave, you know. They're like in-laws that way. It's nice, the anticipation, they come, they stay, but not too long. But it was a great legislative session. It really was. We did a tremendous amount of good work. And I credit them with that. You know, we've seen Albany fail, and we've seen Albany ugly, and we've seen state government that didn't work. We see government that doesn't work right now, today, in Washington, D.C. We know what gridlock looks like. We know what it looks like when people put their politics before the people. And that's what gridlock is to me. It's people putting their politics before the people. Because when you argue your politics, which is very easy to do, and each side does that, you wind up just bumping heads and nothing happens. And the people who lose are the people you were supposed to serve, which are the people of the state or the people of the country. Albany for many, many years was that way. Washington thinks they know gridlock. We know gridlock before Washington knew gridlock. And we did it New York style with high drama. But that was a long time ago. We passed 4 on-time budgets in a row. This was our 4th. It hasn't been done in 40 years. So let's give them a round of applause. The budget is all about jobs, getting the economy running. The economy is still problematic. The national economy is still problematic and not doing what it should be doing. So we've been working double time on bringing jobs back to this state, creating jobs in the state, keeping businesses in the state. We focused on job 1, which was to get taxes down, because I've heard for too long from too many that the taxes are the problem in this state, and that's why people were leaving. That's why businesses were leaving. To get taxes down, we had to get spending down. This government, over the past 4 years, we have had smaller increases in spending than at any time since they've been keeping budget records, believe it or not. Less than 2% per year increases. Because we kept the spending down, we could reduce the taxes. And today, everybody in this state pays a lower personal income tax rate than they did 4 years ago. The income tax for the middle class is the lowest level since 1953. We just reduced the corporate taxes in New York from 7.1 to 6.5, lowest level since 1968. Manufacturers' tax, this last legislative session, we brought to 0 because we want to get the manufacturing companies coming back to New York. It hasn't been 0 since 1917. So we are doing what we said we are doing, which is getting the expenses down, getting the taxes down, getting the jobs up, getting the businesses back. That's the single most important thing that this state government can do for Western New York or any other part of the state. We're also investing in jobs. Our Regional Economic Development Corporation is working very well all across the state. The Buffalo Billion is going great guns. And the proof is in the pudding. The jobs are coming back. We created 446,000 new jobs over the past 4 years. This state is number 2 in job creation since the recession. Number 2 in job creation. We now have 7.6 million jobs in this state, more private sector jobs than the state has ever had before, period. That's what New York is looking like. And Buffalo is looking even better. I tell you that the signs of progress are everywhere. You can see them on construction sites, but even more important, you can see it on people's faces. You can see it in the energy that people have about them. And Buffalo was down for a long time, but Buffalo is on the way back. And that is inarguable. Now, the reason we're here today is jobs and the economy is important. Public safety is also important. And public safety, when it comes to our young people, is especially important. And I wish I could stand before you today and say that Deanna's story is alone, is an isolated story, is the first I've heard such a story. Unfortunately, it's not. And that is the problem. They say in substance abuse, the first step is to admit the problem and not deny the problem. Well, with that theory, state of New York has a problem with heroin. And it is not, heroin is a problem nationwide. Our problem is much, much worse. 1/3 of all the heroin confiscated last year in this country came from the state of New York. 1/3. We've had double the number of deaths in just 4 years in the state of New York. And people say, well, we had heroin before. This heroin is much worse than the heroin of the 60s or the 70s. It is much more powerful. It is much more concentrated. It is much more addictive. It's much cheaper. They're selling $5 bags and $10 bags of heroin. And once a young person starts, it's incredibly difficult to get them to stop. And this heroin is for younger users than the older heroin was. Older heroin in the 60s and the 70s were about people who were 28, 30, 32. These are teenagers. These are high school kids. And it's getting younger and younger. And it's not a problem that is over there. This is a problem that is primarily upstate New York, primarily suburban, rural communities, primarily middle class and affluent communities, primarily white, and it is growing exponentially. So, working together, as you heard, we've come up with a truly comprehensive approach where we start with law enforcement as a public safety issue, 100 new troopers dedicated just to this, trained in heroin interdiction, heroin treatment. That's job one, and we give them another round of applause, and we thank them for their service. We are increasing the criminal penalties for distributors, dealers, pharmacists, anyone who would be engaged in the dissemination of the product. We are starting a training campaign on schools all across the state, SUNY schools, also private schools, where the police, the teachers, etc., will be trained in observing heroin, etc. We have a public awareness campaign. We have changed the law so that insurance companies must provide treatment, and the insurance companies, which historically love to play games with treatment and find delays, we have a regulatory agency that's going to make sure the insurance companies are providing treatment when the people actually need treatment. So we're doing everything that government can do, from the laws to the crimes. We're doing everything that government can do. But this is not a problem that government alone is going to solve. And I don't want anyone to leave here today and say, well, that's taken care of. They passed the law, the troopers, the police, the teachers. This is worse than that. And it's not a problem that government and teachers and other people are going to solve. It's a problem that is only going to be solved when each and every one of us takes our own responsibility. When it comes to security, they use an expression, if you see something, say something, right? Every one of us is in charge with citizens' responsibility for safety. So if you see something, say something. Well, with that same sense of individual responsibility and acknowledging community responsibility and community connections, we want to say, if you know something, do something. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, you know, I knew something was wrong. Or my son is his son's friend, and I knew he was on drugs. Or my daughter told me she was at a party and she saw him taking heroin. But I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, and now it's too late. Because people think someone else is going to do it. It's someone else's responsibility. It's not their place. It's all of our place, right? Because Deanna's son is my son, is your son, because we are all connected. And we do care all about one another. It's not enough to do for yourself and do for your family. we're here to do for ourselves. And when everyone acknowledges their responsibility, that's when we will really get ahead of this crisis and this epidemic. So we're going to be doing what we need to do, and we're going to do it with bipartisan resolve, and we're going to do it with competence, and we're not going to spare any resources. But it's a fight that we have to fight together. So I'm here today to ask for your help in this also. It's your neighbor, it's your relative, it's your child's friend who may be the next victim if we don't act. Thank you, and God bless you.